give some people a few minutes to get on. Happy Friday. It is the weekend. Well, it might as well be, right? Like you're already halfway through. It's coming. The whole state's probably going to shut down next week on Tuesday at least. So we got that going for us, right? You're going to make it. You're going to make it. It's going to be great. Okay. I normally go live on Thursdays, so if you're joining, thanks for joining on Friday. I had some clients in the studio yesterday, so I cannot go live at noon. So I figured that I would try on Friday. I got my little fidget spinner here. Isn't that cool? Ooh. So what are we talking about today? I am going to be answering the question that I get asked the most as a boudoir photographer. And I'm sure a lot of you can probably guess what that question is. But I think over everything that I get asked, I think the most is, especially by clients that are like in the studio, how did you get into this? How did you get into boudoir? You've been doing it for a really long time. Like, clearly you didn't do it because it was trendy, because you've been doing it before it was trendy. So, like, how did you get into boudoir, to photographing women? That's what I get asked the most. And so I thought that I would share my origin story with you guys, because it's kind of an interesting story. I like to say that I didn't find boudoir. Boudoir found me. And maybe it's just like a cat. If you're a cat person, there's the saying that, hold on, my assistant is texting me. Let me make sure. Yeah, so if you have a cat, or if you like cats, you don't find cats. Cats find you. They decide. Cats choose you. You don't choose cats. And so I kind of feel like boudoir is sort of the same thing. For me, at least, I didn't necessarily choose boudoir. Boudoir chose me. And the reason why I say that is because I kind of stumbled upon it by accident. And since we have a lot of new people in the group, it's been a while since I've kind of talked about like my background and my origin story. So I'm going to give you a little bit of a background about me and how I got into boudoir. So for those of you who don't know, I have been specializing and focusing on boudoir since 2011. And so it's been a long time, right? And that was kind of before the market was really flooded with a lot of boudoir photographers. The thing that was like really popular back then was family portraits were very big. And there were a lot of people who were doing kind of like the shoot and burn is what we call it. And it was basically like you show up for a session, they take your pictures, and then they put your images on a disc and they give you the disc. So that's going to date me a little bit. So it was a lot of families, a lot of like babies and seniors. And so whenever I was a baby photog, I was doing all of that as well. So I was, photographing mostly portraits. I was shooting weddings. I was photographing seniors, families, babies. I worked for J. Fago Photography whenever I was in college for several years. I second shot weddings with a photographer out of Stillwater, Minnesota. Um, Lori Schneider, you can look her work up. Her work is gorgeous. I second shot with her for 6 or 7 years. I was a manager of a J.C. Penney portrait studio. That was, yeah. And that was before like people were going in and just like doing awkward family photos. Like people were still going in and like doing them for real. Um, and while all of it was okay, none of it really resonated with me all that much. I wasn't really finding it fulfilling. I was having a hard time connecting with like the children. And then being like a second shooter at a wedding, you don't really get the time and the opportunity to connect with the couple. So I really wasn't, I was trying to find my footing as a photographer, and I was kind of having a little bit of a hard time doing that. And I did an engagement shoot for a coworker, and she had a very unique style. She was very kind of rockabilly. She was really into kind of like the pinup, like old school, like pinup style. She loved everything vintage. We did a themed engagement shoot at this old restored drive-in. I lived in Minnesota at the time, so this was up in Minneapolis, where I started AIDS and at Boudoir. So this was before then. So that was probably 2008, 2009, probably 2008. We did an engagement shoot, and it came out really cute, and it was super fun. And a few months later, she reached out and she said, "Hey, I just painted my dressing room this like Pepto-Bismol pink color, and it reminds me of like the pinup calendars. And I have like some outfits, and I think it would be really cute if we did like a pinup style photo shoot. What do you think?" And it sounded fun. I had never done anything like that before, so I was kind of going into it blind. And she had a friend that came and like did her makeup and did her hair, and she had a bunch of outfits. And I just kind of like, I did my research, and I like looked at different things online, in terms of like posing and things like that. And so I kind of just copied what I found. The photo, it used a different set of skills that I had not fully fleshed out yet. And so it was a fun shoot, but it definitely proved that I still kind of had a lot to learn. And so we both kind of went our separate ways. She was happy, so I was like, okay, cool. It was the most fun I'd ever had at a shoot. But I was like, ooh, for me, I was very critical. She was happy with them. But I had a blast. It was so much fun. I didn't have to deal with like a toddler having a meltdown. I didn't have to deal with a drunk groomsman hitting on me. I didn't have to deal with like, mom and dad in an argument because dad didn't want to be in the picture. Like all of the things that I had dealt with doing kind of other traditional style portraits, I didn't have to deal with. I just had to make her feel pretty. And I was like totally on board with that. And this was, like I said, this was probably back in 2008, 2009. And so I still had a magazine subscription to PPA, which is the Professional Photographers Association. And so I was flipping through it, and I came across an article that said something along the lines of photographers are finding success in the boudoir genre. It is not as taboo anymore as it used to be. And here's one photographer's story of their success and how they approach it. And I was reading like what kind of photography it was, and I was like, wait a minute. I just I just did this. Like I just did this with Paula like last month. There's a name for this? Not only is there a name for it, but like there are photographers out there actually making a living at doing like photographing women. My mind was blown, okay? My mind was blown. Um and it was just like a light bulb went off. Um and so I kind of started doing a little bit more research, and like yeah, there weren't many, but there were definitely some photographers who were doing boudoir around the country at the time. And so I said, well, I need to figure out how to make this happen. Like, and so not long after, she had a sister, Paula had a sister, who also who liked her pictures, and she was like, well, I want to do one of those too. And so we did a shoot with her, and like, look, I did this like I was using the same like lighting principles that I had learned taking regular portraits and applying them to women, like photographing women. And so like I lit them like I would light a toddler. Um so they were very different. I still had a lot to learn. Like they were very different than what I do now. But she seemed happy as well. And so I said, okay, well, I need to practice, clearly. I need to figure out how to do this better so that I can start doing more of this, because, like, this is fun. Like, now I actually really like taking photos. Like, this is resonating with me. I have always been very, very interested in masks that people wear in a regular basis, depending on like what situation they're in, what kind of hat they put on, what kind of mask they wear, how humans sort of we have a tendency to put ourselves in costumes. So I kind of felt that there was like a theatrical element to that type of photography, which I really loved. And I've always been a bit of a feminist. I have always advocated for women's rights. I have always been very supportive of women who were independent, who were self-sufficient and didn't necessarily confine to gender societal norms. And so whenever kind of like the whole like empowerment and like body positivity and all of that started to kind of take shape, that's where I really like kind of found my momentum. And so I shared, if you have not taken a peek at the image that I shared in the event, go ahead and take a peek at that, because I kind of mentioned like, oh, I'm going to talk a little bit about this. So I knew that I needed to kind of expand my portfolio. And so I got a couple of friends of mine, slightly tipsy. Well, I asked them ahead of time, and then they agreed to it. So I was basically like, hey, I need to practice taking pictures of women in their undies. Can you be a model? Here is some tequila, and I have my camera, and we're just gonna have a good time. So the first one that I photographed, she got very drunk, and one of those images is the image that I shared in the event. Very different from what you see coming out of my camera today. And so I just did that. I just photographed some friends until, I got more comfortable. And finally, I got to the point where I was like, okay, I am ready to make the transition. And in 2011, I rebranded my company. I renamed my company. I changed the website. I kind of started from scratch. And that first year, I booked more photo shoots just doing boudoir only than I had in the previous years trying to book and photograph every other type of portrait photography. Um, and so that was like a pretty telltale for me. Like, okay, I think I found my space. I found my niche. I discovered what it is that I am good at doing and that's fulfilling for me and that I enjoy. Um, and that was 2 states, uh, 7 studios, and over a decade ago. So, yeah, that's kind of why I say that boudoir sort of found me. I didn't find it. But yeah, so that's kind of my origin story. And again, I am April Corville. I am the owner and photographer behind Aidenette Boudoir. And we will be going live again next week on a different topic. So happy Friday. Have a good weekend, guys, and stay warm and safe.